Good morning. I'm delighted to be here. It was only last night at 7 o'clock that Alicia and I discovered that we were doing a joint presentation, and all sorts of things that could go wrong have gone wrong. As you can imagine, I was up at 4 o'clock this morning, so if the presentation works in a bizarre way, that is one of the explanations. Another explanation is that I spoke to Marie and she said, well, don't worry, you don't have to do a PowerPoint presentation, which is wonderful because I've never done this before. But with Alicia's help, we've put something together which you hope you'll enjoy, starting with half empty or half full, a promising picture or a scary one. I suppose it depends very much on your perspective. We stand at a critical moment in Earth's history, a time when humanity must choose its future. As the world becomes increasingly interdependent and fragile, the future at once holds great peril and great promise. We urgently need a shared vision of basic values to provide an ethical foundation for the emerging world community. It was wonderful to hear Professor Moldan introduce the Earth Charter and give some of the real background that he knows about through experience and I know about secondhand and through learning. And I'm not therefore going to go back to the origins of the Earth Charter, except to add one thing, I think, which is that its emergence can be rooted back in 1948 and the IUCN, the International Conservation Network, which began a process at the end of the Second World War when the devastation of biodiversity in particular began to become evident. And it was recognized even then that as well as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there needed to be some complementary declaration of our responsibility to the planet, to living creatures on the planet, as well as to one another. So the roots of the Earth Charter are very old indeed. The work of putting the Earth Charter together, which led to its promulgation in the year 2000 in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands has been an extraordinarily important part of the development of the Earth Charter since 1992, meant that so much emphasis went on into the pulling together by the millennium, by the year 2000, into an agreed charter that could be brought out to the world at that time, that very little energy was left and put into how to make use of the charter afterwards. A great deal, therefore, in its preparation, and the hope that once it was born, it would carry itself. And in some ways, I would suggest that what's happened with Alida, Alicia, and I, and I'll come back to this a little bit later, is a demonstration of the fragility of the Earth Charter at the moment of its birth, and I still think in its 10-year history, we are still at a very fragile age. And yet, the way that it is underpinning this particular conference demonstrates how vital it is, and my imagination is that it's going to go much further from this point onwards. Now, the important bit is if I can move on to the next slide. Yeah, I've got a next one, but I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to leave it just on the because multitasking means that you can look at it and see if you agree with it or not while I talk through it. I'm going to now, because I was told I only had 10 minutes, very strictly, really get into it. How many of you not only had heard of the Earth Charter, but have actually read it, have got some idea of what it's about? Oh, rather more than I expected, maybe about a third, a quarter to a third. The Earth Charter essentially is a UN-inspired declaration of 16 principles and 61 sub-principles for a just, sustainable, and peaceful global society. And if anyone asks you what the Earth Charter is, that's the phrase, the slogan that is most simple to hold on to. A just, sustainable, and peaceful global society. And it's based essentially, I've gone on to, somehow I've gone on, I wanted the previous one, I think. Yeah, that's the one I wanted to stay with. It's based essentially upon 4 pillars or foundations that are also not too difficult to remember or understand. Respect and care for the community of life, ecological integrity, social and economic justice, and democracy, non-violence, and peace. Those are the 4 foundations through which the 16 principles emerge. Now, the 16 principles we're not moving on to. Next. There. I'm not going to try to go through in order all 16 principles, but you will see through the key themes of the Earth Charter that they emerge. I'm not quite sure whether there are 16 there or not, because that was one of the things that we didn't talk about when we found the slide. But it's a good slide, and it's going to be up there for quite a while now. I have mentioned, and we've heard about the roots. The only other thing that I want to say about it is extremely important that it was not a top-down document. It emerged through, with the help of the internet, the wonder of the internet, the importance of the internet, the hope of the internet, the possibilities of the internet, the recognition that we can now communicate in ways that have never been possible for us before, that we have a tool which can bring about change and transformation towards sustainability. And I think the Earth Charter is a good example of this. Collaboration and participation on a worldwide basis, which led to an increasing ability for drafts to be passed, which brought together people, thousands of people, hundreds of organizations throughout the world, working on those issues that we've highlighted and up behind you. Lawyers, economists, politicians, scientists, and faith leaders, and leaders from indigenous peoples, collaboratively thinking about all the issues that the Earth Charter comprehends. So when you come to read it, it's a very dense document. It's only got 2,447 words in it, a preamble from which I quoted, the articles themselves, and then a section called The Way Forward. You'll find that it moves from poetry into the most specific prose, the hardest, deepest, demanding language that you are ever likely to come across. It's all there. It's been compared by a lawyer, very, very well-known Pakistani lawyer, Parvez Hassan, to the Magna Carta, the American Declaration of Independence, and by a wonderful professor of management, whose name I've just forgotten. Does anyone remember who I'm talking about? Hindu at Harvard Business School who died a couple of years ago. Yes, Kamla Chowdhury. Is that who you said? Kamla Chowdhury. Kamla Chowdhury. So on one hand you have a lawyer, on the other hand you have Kamla Chowdhury, who is Hindu, and compared it to the Vedas and said that you have to read it over and over and over again and meditate upon it. So it's a very, very exciting, inspirational, demanding document. I think I've nearly finished probably my 10 minutes. I think, nearly finished the... what do I have to do next? This is such an interesting slide. I've nearly finished the slides. I've got one more after this, which you'll recognize. This is a very interesting slide. Contact the Earth Charter. What can you do? Endorse the Earth Charter individually, and if you have an organization, even more strongly, look at what the Earth Charter asks of you, and if you feel that your values and principles are in line with the Earth Charter, endorse the Earth Charter. It's being used now in certain parts of the world, particularly Australia and New Zealand, being drawn on by lawyers for environmental law, because it provides soft law. And the more organizations throughout the world are endorsing it, the stronger the voice of the Earth Charter is in bringing about change in issues of environmental law. The difficulty about this particular one is it doesn't tell you quite who to get in touch with, apart from Alicia, but we've got copies which also give you my email details, and the very last slide is that one, to go back to it and to hope, therefore, that you recognize that there is an ambivalence and a paradox. There is hope. There is also, at the moment, a great deal for us to be concerned about in trying to build sustainability into our world. Thanks very much.